and welcome to our program. Today we have Pernille Trember, co-founder of Databrug, joining us online. We'll talk about personal data, how can we protect it, and the ethical debate around it. Welcome, Pernille. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
So maybe let's start by defining personal data. What is it?
Well, personal data is data which can identify you as a person. So it's everything around you identifying you. That's personal data.
Okay. And why is it valuable? Why do companies want it, and why should we protect it?
It's valuable because the more I know about you, the easier it is for me to either make you buy something from me or make you have a certain opinion, vote for me, for example. So the more I know about you and I know things about you through your data, the better. And that can be everything from your browser data, your IP address, where are you sitting right now, your age, all the normal data about you, all this all together, put together in a profile, gives you as a salesperson or as a company, gives you a lot of power.
Okay. And why did companies start collecting data then? It's mostly for marketing purposes?
No, there are many ways you can use data. A lot of companies will use it for marketing purposes. Other companies will use it also to optimize their products towards their customers. It can be that, and that now we're only talking personal data. There are lots of other data like industrial data, which, for example, is wind data or traffic data. You use that in many, many different ways as well. But if you only talk personal data, it can be used to either marketing, product, making your product better, serving you a product or a service. So there are many different ways you can use personal data.
Mm-hmm. And some people might even like this this optimized online experience where you get personalized recommendations or ads. So why would it be bad for companies to do that then, if users can actually take something from that?
The bad thing is the way it's done today. I would love to get personalized offers and content from a website like the BBC, for example, but it shouldn't be the BBC deciding what data or collecting all the data about me and profiling me and then serving me personalized data, personalized content. It should be me in control of my own data. And that is possible. Today, most companies giving personalization, they collect too much data and profile you, and then they can personalize. And that's why a lot of customers or individuals feel it's pretty creepy, right? Oh my God, how did Facebook knew that I have a mother who suffers from Alzheimer's, for example? And that's maybe because you searched for Alzheimer's or you went to an association dealing with Alzheimer's, and they gossip to each other about this little detail. So the whole internet economic infrastructure today is totally unfair towards the individual, because these companies sit on so much data about us, and they profile us and they target us. It has to be turned completely around. And some companies and organizations are actually working towards that. You could call it individual data control, where it's you deciding, okay, dear BBC, I would actually like to get personalized content. Do you want to make a profile of me? You can stick your you can actually get down into my personal data box where I have my Netflix data, my Spotify data, my browsing data. I have various data forms in my personal data bank, and the BBC can actually get into that and then draw a media profile of me and use that to give me personalized content without getting my data, without sitting on my data, so they can't abuse my data. And that's the future, but it's very, very new. But that's what we're seeing changing now.
Okay. So there are some companies that are actually already doing that.
Yes, there are. It's pilots. BBC is doing pilots, but there are other companies trying various different ways where they work with, you could also say, call it privacy by design, where they don't abuse my data behind my back. So even
Okay.
though that you say yes to everything when you go to a website, then you feel, oh my God, they are taking my data and they're using it, and how do they know this and that? Sometimes it's good, other times it's bad. But the best thing is when you are in control and you actively say, yes, it's okay for me.
Okay. And so in which circumstances are we giving our data? Is it only when we accept? Is there other circumstances that we don't really understand that we're actually giving away our data?
Well, the of course you give data if you sign up to a product, if you sign up to an app and you give your name and address and all this stuff. But you're also giving data when you're just browsing around on the internet, even though you have to say yes for cookies. But most users just say that because they're blind now towards these pop-up boxes where you say yes and no. And via your browsing, you give so much away you can't imagine. Especially, for example, your location data, your IP address, where are you now? If you can collect one person's location data over 6 months, for example, you would know everything about that person, where they shop, where they live, when they're in the house, you'll know where they live because they will probably be in that house between 10 in the evening and 6 in the morning. You will know their friends, the job, if they have a lover. You'll know so much, and it's because location data is so important. But there are lots of other data. Also, what computer are you sitting at browsing? Um, something called fingerprinting data. How fast are you typing on your keyboard, and lots of other stuff.
Yeah, it's actually scary. There is this documentary that you recommended on dataethics.eu, Made to Measure. That
Yes,
maybe you can explain a little bit about it, what they did.
Made to Measure is a German documentary where they asked individuals to give in their data, and then they would um, replay that person with an actress or an actor, depending on the data. So they chose one person, and they only chose that person's search data from Google. Most people use Google search, unfortunately. So they only took this woman's search data, and they hired an actress, and this actress replayed her life over the past year. And that person was sitting watching it and really losing her mouth because it was, if she had a depression or a problem with her eating and her fitness, and really personal stuff was revealed because of her search patterns. And that's just one little place where Google gets so much data about you. All your searches on Google are stored and used as part of a very detailed profile on you.
It's so scary, like how big this can actually be. And
It's power. It's
yeah,
power and money today, right? The biggest companies in the world are the richest companies in the world, like Google and Facebook and Amazon, and they use so much data you can't imagine.
and there's also why this free services are actually not
Mm.
free. You actually pay with data, even though people don't really understand this. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Some people will say, "Okay, I'll pay with my data. I don't really care if I pay with my data." But then I always ask, "But what's the price? What's the price of you knowing your birthday? What's the price of knowing your sexual orientation? What's the price of knowing if your mother is sick or if your neighbor has cancer?" All these small pieces of data are worth a lot of money, and you are paying blindfolded. You have no idea how much money you are actually paying. You just pay.
Yeah. And what the consequences are going to be on the long run, you have no idea about it. Yeah.
Well, there are some, when we talk about consequences, only a few of us will feel it on ourselves individually. But a lot of people will never get an interview for a job they're applying for, because they might find something about them on Facebook they don't like. A lot of people will never be told why they were not interviewed for that part. They might not get a loan in the bank, and there are lots of individual consequences, but there are also societal consequences, because data can be abused to make many of us walking in the same direction. Like they said about Cambridge Analytica in the US elections, where you could actually give people who were critical towards, for example, one candidate, they would get even more stuff, which was very critical, and then you would get more stuff about positive stuff about something you were positive about. So you can actually manipulate, knowing a lot about individuals.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful, definitely. And now talking a little bit more about youth and children. Social media are basically the go-to online platforms for youth in general. But actually, people need to be at least 13 to sign up for Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. So what are the consequences of this?
Well, the consequences are that children are lying themselves older because they want to get on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram. So they just lie about their age, and a lot of parents accept it. And then they are treated as if they were grown-ups. That means you can just collect all the data you want, all about what they're doing, and then you can manipulate them. You can also manipulate grown-ups, but children have to be 13 because the law says that you're not supposed to collect data about them and then give them personalized content, because they're too easy to manipulate. So you treat them as grown-ups. So that's one big problem about kids on all these sites. For example, YouTube made a YouTube Kids. Facebook made, I think they made a Facebook Kids as well. But the kids don't want to be there. They want to be on the big platforms. And the platforms don't take any responsibility for this. There's one platform which does, and that's Lego, the Danish global Lego company. They have a very good way of verifying whether you are a child or not. Not even without knowing that child's identity. And that's what big companies should do. But they, of course, want to have those kids out there, because then they can already prepare the kids to become Google, Facebook customers when they grow up.
Yeah, they're prepared to be users from they're prepared
Yes.
to be manipulated from very early age, and that's also not good at all. So this alternative platforms for youth are clearly not the answer. So what do you propose? How can companies collect and process children's data in an ethical way?
They can't collect children's data and use them at all. They should just leave children under 13 or maybe 16. That depends on which country you live in. In the US, it's in the EU, it's 16. In Denmark, it's 13. We decided that our children are more mature, I guess. We should not collect any data about them. They have to be kids. So, of course, they would need some data to serve them through the products, but you should not use any data about the kids for advertising.
Okay. And dataethics.eu has a self-defense guide, like a digital self-defense guide. What can you tell us about it? Like, what tips can you share?
When I teach children and grown-ups, I tell them it's a good idea to try and use some alternative tools. Why always use Chrome, Google Search, Facebook Messenger? For God's sake, I've never used Facebook Messenger. So there are alternatives both for individuals and for companies. And instead of using Google Search, for example, you could use startpage.com, DuckDuckGo.com, Quant.com. There are lots and lots of alternative search engines, and they don't profile you. They give you advertising, some of them, but they give you what is called contextual advertising. If you search for something, you can get an ad for that what you search for. You don't get an ad for based on your profile and what we know you're dreaming about. You can also, instead of using Facebook Messenger, which is probably the worst app I know of when it comes to collecting data, and so many people use it, and Facebook even calls it Messenger, not Facebook Messenger. I always say Facebook Messenger. Remember, it's Facebook. They follow everything you do in there, everything. So instead, you could use Wire.com, which is a really cool app. You could use Signal, or you could even use Telegram. And that's where you can have your private conversation, which most people expect. If you're on a chat app, you want to have a private conversation.
Yeah.
Instead of browsers, instead of Chrome browsers, a Chrome browser, which everybody is using, you could use a Firefox browser, or even Safari from Apple is good, because they, by default, block third-party cookies. They block that you can be tracked and followed all the way around the web.
Okay.
So we have lots and lots of those alternatives.
What about WhatsApp? Because even though it's also owned by Facebook, is it? Do you think it's kind of the same as Facebook Messenger, or is it better? Is it worse?
It's not the same, because they say it's encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, which means that they can't see what you are writing, which they can see on Messenger. So in that way, it's different. If it's true, it's encrypted, but I believe it is. But what they use is metadata, and that's very important. That's who you speak with, where you are when you speak with them, how long you speak with them, your phone number, and that's shared with Facebook. So I don't recommend WhatsApp either.
Okay. So how can people use social media without giving away so much information? Do you need to choose an alternative platform, or can you use like Facebook? What tips do you have on that?
Especially for children, and what I do myself is that I separate my private identity with my professional identity. Of course, children don't have a professional identity yet, but they understand. Decide for yourself what is private, and don't put it out there. A lot of children will know I will never put a picture of myself in this situation out there, but I tell them what kind of areas they should worry about, like their health and their political opinion when they grow up, and the location, and all these data. They should keep it for themselves, and then when they become teens, pre-teens, they can start building a professional identity. And the professional, it means that I am more or less in control of. If you search me on Google, most people use Google, I don't use it, but you will use it probably. And if you search my name on Google, you will find mainly stuff about me, which I like to be out there. My professional identity, I want to be out there, I want to be found. I also have to make money, but I don't want you to find anything about my dog or my friends. So I keep all private stuff out, away from social media. And I know that's pretty tough. So if children or grown-ups want to use TikTok, I would definitely use another name than my own. I would use a pseudonym. Some people will call it fake name, but you are totally entitled to use another name than your own. You just shouldn't cheat other people and pretend to be someone else. I'd also use a VPN service on my phone, because then I can choose to be somewhere else. I can hide my location.
Do you think
And
everybody should
even,
have it?
yes, I think it's, if you look to Lego, they have a platform for 50 million children below 13, and they say, don't use your own name. And the German authorities also at least once said to children, don't use your own name. Because they don't know what it means to be a public person. They are learning faster than grown-ups these days, I think, in the hard way, you know. But it's very hard to be a public person and understand that. You have no idea in 5 years what that information about you can be used for.
And what about ad blockers? Do you think they're needed as well?
They were needed some years ago, but if you use a browser like Safari or Brave or Firefox, you don't need an ad blocker. Only if you want to get rid of ads, of course. But an ad blocker usually blocked ads, but they also blocked third-party trackers, third-party cookies.
Okay.
Today, most browsers, apart from Chrome, block third-party cookies by default. So in many ways, just by using Firefox or Safari, you block third-party cookies, but then you support some of the websites who are dependent on ads, which in some ways are okay if it's not manipulative ads. If it's what I explained before, contextual ads, it's okay.
Okay. And what about like for parents? Do you have any tips for parents? Like how can they keep their children safe on the internet?
I think parents should really try to keep them away from social media platforms and some games also, which demand you are 13 as long as possible. Some parents let their kids 7 years, 6 years old sit alone on YouTube, and they're supposed to be 13 on YouTube. I would also go together in the school class when you start in the first grade and talk to the other parents about how long can we actually keep them away from here, because they should not worry about them not learning to use this. That's going to be, they will learn it, but keep them away as long as possible. And then you have to talk to them about all platforms they use are public platforms. All data, everything they share out there can be used sooner or later. So you have to discuss what it means to be a public person. Use another name than your own. That's not 100% security at all. It's just one little measure, which is okay. Don't cheat other people. Also put a VPN on their phones so they can be another place and where they actually are, to protect them in that way.
Okay. And do you think that besides the parents, education institutions also have some type of responsibility, let's say, to educate children in
Yes.
digital security?
Yes, of course they have. And we have a new class, a new theme in Denmark called technology understanding. And I've been teaching a lot what I call data understanding. And that's what we really need. They need to understand the good sides, because there are lots of positive sides of data and the bad sides where it can be abused. So of course schools have a responsibility. They also have a responsibility in the different services they're using. Are they giving away the kids' data to somebody who will abuse it later? Are they checking out what kind of services they choose to engage the children with and stuff like that? And the whole society has a responsibility. Unfortunately, Google is taking over the schools in Denmark, which I find really problematic. Instead of using, for example, setting up a system which is based on open source and much more protective software.
Okay, so your proposal in here is to just change platforms in this case?
Yeah, find other platforms. They're working on that in France and Germany. They have alternatives. They might not be as convenient as Google is, for example, but we also have to find out there's a balance between convenience and privacy. Convenience is not everything, I believe.
Most people then maybe will have a little bit of trouble changing from Google, though, to some other alternative platforms, like for instance Ecosia or other ones, because Google is so broad. You really it's so much easier for you to find a lot of things, and specifically what you want. And Ecosia, for instance, that's personally what I have most experience with. Usually it doesn't go so straight to the point, let's say. It has a lot of things that are around that topic, but it's not exactly what you search for. Which other browsers and search engines do you recommend are they as good as Google?
Of course, Google is good because a lot of people use it. So if you use a free tool, you not only pay with data, you also pay with your time, because the more you use it, the better they get.
Okay.
So the more you use Ecosia, the better it gets. We have to remember that. There are other search engines like Startpage, which is actually based on Google searches.
Okay.
But they have a license agreement with Google, so they anonymize you. So Google will not get your profile and get all your personal data. But you can use it, and it's more like a neutral Google search, whereas you get a personalized Google search today. And I'm still waiting to see research, academic research, showing if this is the best way of searching. I know that a lot of people have actually killed the idea of the filter bubble, that you get more and more and more of the same, but you get more and more and more of the same. And what are the consequences of that? I haven't found academic research about that, so I don't know if Google are as good as a lot of people feel they are.
Okay. Okay. We still have a little bit of time for this program, so I also wanted to ask you about Metaverse. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Metaverse is going to be a place controlled in. There are going to be many metaverses. There's not going to only be one metaverse. But unfortunately, I think that Facebook or Meta will be one of the bigger ones because they already have so many users. And if it's going to be a Facebook metaverse, I'm worried about it because what do they live from? How do they get money? They get money from our data. And in the metaverse, you get even more data out of people. It's, for example, biometric data. My iris, you can scan my eyes, you can scan the way I walk, my voice, lots of biometric data, which is my data, can be used to identify you and to profile you and to target you with different messages. So it's a new way of collecting even more data. And that is worrisome if it's in Facebook's metaverse. But it could also be another metaverse based on more open source, decentralized system where your data is not abused to commercialize it, where you can actually control your own life in another way. So there are going to be various ways of being online or being in the metaverse. The problem is Facebook is already so big that they will probably attract a lot of people.
Perfect. Thank you for your insight on that. So we've run out of time for this program, but we'll pick up where we left off on the next one. Thank you so much for joining us, Pernille.
Thank you so much too. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for staying with us. See you soon.